welcome to the ReWatcher. I'm your cult leader, Tom Pod, and I just watched the Fantastic Four from 2005, the first cinematic release of the Fantastic Four. That's right, because last week we watched the unreleased Fantastic Four film, and I probably have a lot more to say about that one than I do about this one, because this one, well, it definitely exists, doesn't it? It's definitely a movie. Based on that, you probably think I don't like this, but you know what? You should like this video, because every Friday this month we are breaking down a Fantastic Four film. So why not subscribe so we don't miss out? And with all that said, let's dive in to 2005's Fantastic Four from director Tim Story, who gave us Barbershop and then made Taxi. And apparently the executives at 20th Century Fox saw Taxi and were so impressed by it that they gave the Fantastic Four job. I'm not joking, by the way. This is apparently true. The Jimmy Fallon and Queen Latifah vehicle, no pun intended. Actually, you know what, pun intended. That got him this gig. So, hey, for a man with Story in his name, I bet you he knows a thing or two about Story. Well, you wouldn't know it from watching this movie. There's so little to say about the story of the film, because like, there's not a lot of plot. And I guess on paper it's like, hey, it's the Fantastic Four. I mean, you know, they go into space and they get their powers. But it feels like once they get their powers, they don't know what to do. It feels like they just do a lot of faffing around and then they're like, oh, we better get to a finale. So it's not really good. There's not much plot here to make you any bit invested in this film. Now, I will say they make some big changes, some of which I actually, you know what? I don't think there's any change here that's for the worse necessarily. Like, Doom goes into space with them, and I'm like, that's okay. It's kind of weird he got his powers in space, which is something we'll get to a bit more in a minute. They also do a thing where basically he was in a relationship with Sue Storm, or he is in a relationship when the movie starts. It's like a weird love triangle, I guess, but because she used to go out with Reed, and of course eventually she will go out with Reed again. But I find it really, really strange because they don't really do anything with that. It's just an idea they throw out there. It's like, at first I was like, oh, they're making a love triangle, but it kind of, you know, having to go through every single bit of it. But then they never really do anything with it. By the way, Reed and Sue's relationship seemingly ended just because Reed is like, I only care about science, that's my one love. Wow. What an amazing, what an amazing plot that is. Oh, I only care for science. Oh, Reed, if only you could understand the science of love. You know, it's so bad. Their relationship in general is just not really good, but let's talk about the cast on that note in general. So we have Johan Gruffud. Johan Gruffud. He's Welsh. I'm messing up his name. Johan Gruffud is Mr. Fantastic. I think one of those is bound to be right.
Johan Griffith.
He's Mr. Fantastic. Now, he's not terrible. He's decent. I mean, he looks the part, certainly. And that's a minor touch. A minor change to his source material. He gets his grey hair in space. I don't know why. I don't know why he gets his grey hair from space. Why did no one else's hair turn grey? But, you know, I'm fine with that. I suppose, like, the only way they actually explained it in the 94 Fantastic Four and been like, oh, it's been 10 years, he's starting to grey at the temples. I'm fine with it. It's not something I ever gave much thought in general, to be honest. But yeah, he looks the part. He's not terrible. He's decent enough. I don't think he was amazing. But again, like, I think the problem here is that, like, a lot of the material that they're given doesn't do any of the actors any favours. And that's certainly the case for Jessica Alba as well as Sue Storm. She just doesn't have a lot to do. I feel like the movie just has her because she's attractive. And I'm not saying that just because. I'm saying it because there's two scenes in this movie where she's totally weirdly objectified. Like, they're all getting into their space suits, which of course eventually become their Fantastic Four suits. And they're all, like, you know, zipped up like wetsuits or whatever. And hers is of course low cut, baby. It's like, whoa. Wow. That's pretty blatant, movie. And then there's a scene where, for some reason, I made it so that Invisible Woman using her powers, her clothes won't go invisible, so she has to strip off anytime she wants to go invisible. Which leads to an obvious scene where she's in her underwear. And you just know some skeezy executive was like, yeah, get Jessica Alba in her underwear, that will sell this movie. And yeah, apparently that's the case. I looked it up. This scene was literally added after Jessica Alba was cast. You fucking creeps. But yeah, like, there's not a lot of material she's given that's even decent. The relationship between Sue and Reed isn't very good because it just does come down to that thing of like, oh, Reed, you don't understand love and romance. You only understand science and space. Terrible. And again, they also don't do anything with the kind of love triangle element, really. So because of that, it's just very flat. They basically feels like they threw the love triangle in so they could get as many of the main characters as they could into the first 2 minutes of the movie. Like 4 of the characters in the movie are like in the boardroom in like the first 2 minutes in Jerusalem. The boardroom where we meet Dr. Doom, who's really Elon Musky in this. He's into rockets. He's got a statue where he looked the bop off Elon Musk as well. Is Doom any good in this? No. I had to think about it. I really shouldn't have had to think about it. He's just not very good in this. Julian McMahon is okay in this, but again, the material and the direction there's nothing there. They bring him into outer space, and his power, I guess, is that his skin starts turning metal, which is another change in the source material. And I'm like, okay, it's a weird choice. It doesn't look very good. I mean, when he's like mid transformation, like turning into the metal man, he just looks like cracked out Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunny. It's not very good. But what's also really weird, right, is he has a scar in his face that obviously does metal underneath, and he's slowly starting to turn metal. And they still make the choice to be like, oh well, his face isn't going to turn metal. Give him a metal mask if he Doom. I'm like, why would you tease his face turning metal and then just not bother anyway? It just seemed like a very strange choice. His mask, by the way, is for humanitarian work. Which, yeah, generally, the mask looks okay. It does look really weird. There's one part where the hood is down and you see his little ears. They just doesn't look right. Dr. Doom's metal ears don't look right. In general, though, the costume isn't that bad, actually. If the cloak was a bit more green, a bit more brighter, maybe I'd be into it more. And there's a weird kind of gap between the eyes and the mask that just looks a little bit strange in live action. But it's not that bad. It's pretty good, actually. But Doom in general just isn't very interesting. I feels like they were basically like, hey, there's not a lot going on in this movie. You need to bring Doom in. And they didn't know what to do with it. So I guess like basically the plot in the second act just takes a rest, more or less. Like the basic plot is like, oh, Thing is cranky at his where he is in life and being the Thing. And, of course, Dr. Doom comes in and he's like, oh, just so you know, mate, he's spending an awful lot of time with Sue Storm instead of trying to fix you, isn't he? Ah. And then the Thing is like, oh, you're right, actually. And that's like the plot, I guess. Because he's like, oh, I can kill Reed Richards if I get rid of his bodyguard, who is the Thing. Even though we have a scene where the Thing fights Reed and Reed actually gets the better of him. And actually, I will say, like, as much as there's not a lot of action scenes, there's like 2 action scenes in this whole movie. The best kind of fight scenes are probably when they're fighting each other. There's the Thing versus Reed, where Reed kind of uses, I guess, his brain over Brawn. I'll give the movie that, even though, not really. Where he stretches himself around him to kind of, constrict him, which is kind of cool. Because, of course, the obvious reaction you would think is the Thing would win. But that was a bit of fun. And we have the Thing versus Johnny Storm, which is one of the better scenes as far as the actions and them fighting each other goes. It's in front of the X Games, because Radical 2000s, baby. Filled with a load of product placement. There's so much product placement on screen, it's crazy. Including like things for Xbox and I guess the most creative use of marketing, even though it's so obvious. As soon as I saw this ad, I was like, oh, I know where this is going straight away. They have an ad for Burger King, home of flame grilled burgers. You see where this is going? They knock Johnny Storm into it, he catches fire, and the burger's on flame. Then some marketing executive is just like, oh yeah, well done. They probably got paid extra for that. Reminding them that their burgers are flame grilled. So that, yeah, I probably should talk about Johnny Storm and the Thing in general, because they are the best characters in the movie and probably the best performances in the movie. And I think it is just because they give them more to do. I'm not trying to dismiss the other actors, but also Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis are fantastic. Chris Evans, first of all, the character isn't necessarily likable, but that's Johnny Storm. They make him really radical, It's like, oh, he's snowboarding out of a helicopter. He gets all the babes and all this rock music anytime he's on screen. And he goes to the X Games just cause, and he does, a couple of flips on fire and that kind of thing. And, he's radical, and that's what they go for. There's one part, like, he's kissing a girl while riding a motorbike while she's in a car. Whoa! Why? It's so stupid. Although there is kind of a funny moment where basically you find out that he crashed in a NASA. He crashed a flight simulator.
They crashed it into a wall. A flight simulator.
Like Homer Simpson.
We're still not sure how it caused the meltdown. There wasn't any nuclear material in the truck.
That antagonistic kind of relationship between him and the Thing is there as well. And again, the highlight of the movie, because they play off each other really well. And they give the 2 best performances. Michael Chiklis is an excellent version of Ben Grimm. He does a great job as the Thing. Apparently he was like the only fan of the Fantastic Four out of the cast already, and he insisted on wearing the suit. Which, let's talk about the suit. I'm sure he probably regretted that as well, because when it's like 8 hours of makeup or whatever, it looks okay at times. I think I prefer if the suit looked a bit rougher. It still looked kind of strangely smooth, like if there was a bit more edge to it. I think I'd like a bit more detail in the face. It just kind of looks like a big orange kind of padding. I think if it had a bit more detail, it would look better. Overall, it's not terrible. There are some times though where you can kind of see the folds in the rubber and the neck. It's not bad. It's admirable. I think it is. I actually think 1994 suit is better. But I do think going forward, the thing should probably be CGI. I think it probably just suits it better, to be honest. And that the good thing is that it doesn't take away from Chiklis's performance at all. He is fantastic. He's someone who I'm like, he deserved better. It's a shame he never really got the right material, because he is fantastic in this film. He just has a really gruff, mannerism to him playing this character that suits the thing down to the ground. Of course, they hide the suit at times by giving him the Ninja Turtles disguise with the hat and the detective coat. And I think he wears that in the comics as well, obviously. But I call it the Ninja Turtles because that's what it reminds me of, which is stupid because it just draws more attention, really. Oh no, it's not a big orange man. Oh, it's just a big orange man in a massive detective costume. Which also that reminds me, you got a really awkward power placement with Nike shoes that are like massive. Like, what was the point of that? Yeah, I also should mention this. I heard this, I'm not sure it's true, but Michael Chiklis' wife apparently called into set one time without announcing she was coming, and she saw her husband in full makeup as the Thing, and was so distressed by what she saw that she had to be physically escorted from the set in order to compose herself. Right, okay, that's kind of weird. But another woman repulsed by the Thing is the real villain of the movie, in my opinion, not Doctor Doom. Fucking Debbie. Who is Debbie? She gets 2 lines, maybe. It's the Thing's fiance. She sees him once on the phone in his detective uniform, and she's like, "Ah!" And she literally screams and runs away from him, like she was Michael Chiklis' actual wife. Yeah, and you're like, "Whoa, that was harsh." She wasn't like, "Are you okay? Is this permanent?" She didn't even ask that. And then in an even funnier moment, like it's just at the end of a big action scene, which I'll talk about in a sec. And she just comes out of the crowd with her ring already ready to go and just puts it on the ground and walks off, and we never see her again. I'm like, wow, Debbie's a bitch. Whoa, man, she's really bad. They don't even give her much to justify any of it. She's just like, oh no, I can't stand the sight of you. Bye. But we should get to that action scene. Probably, one of 2 action scenes that are made properly in the movie, aside from them fighting each other. This is probably the best action scene, but then again, out of the 2, that's not saying much. And yeah, not very good. It's like, basically, first of all, it's like played as like the Fantastic Four save the day, but basically they caused all this. Like, the Thing is on a bridge being like, oh, this sucks, and the guy is going to jump off the bridge, and I guess the guy was like, oh, I'd rather die by jumping off the bridge than die from the Thing, because the Thing starts walking after him, and the man's like, oh no, like a total dumbass, then falls and runs to the bridge. And Thing jumps down off the bridge and does the shoulder kind of into the truck, which seems really dated. We've seen a load of that kind of thing now, flipping trucks and destroying cars, and that kind of shoulder carriage I think has even been in a few things. But it looked pretty good. And from there, of course, there's big car crashes, explosions, and fire and all that. And the Fantastic Four come to save the day, which is when we get that patented Jessica Alba underwear scene, which makes no sense as well, because it's like, oh, go Sue, you can slip through the crowd, which is weird also that, like, Invisible Woman's just going around naked. That's just very strange. So, like, if she was picking up someone and save someone, you're just pressed against her naked body, you're like, that's kind of weird, isn't it? But even though she does that to slip by the crowd, they just get past the crowd in like a minute anyway, without doing any of that stuff. So they all get to use their powers for a little bit. Powers don't look too bad, actually. Reed Richards uses a stretchy arm to save people on a fire truck, I think. Chris Evans' one here, I don't understand at all. He's on fire. There's a little girl who's going to be engulfed by flames, and he jumps in front of her and covers himself and then lights himself on fire. And I'm like, wouldn't that, would she not catch fire as well? Like, you just put yourself on fire holding onto her. But I don't know, I guess the movie doesn't care about it, so why should I? And then Sue obviously uses her force field to contain that explosion. So that's the kind of big action scene. The other big action scene is the ending. which, as we said, Doom is kind of playing Ben Grimm against Reed Richards. He's like, I can turn you back, and he puts him in the kind of fly machine from Cronenberg's thing, which is very relevant when we get to the Josh Trank one. And he loses his powers, which is something the movie doesn't really go back on. Like, if the thing could just become not the thing for a while, he would totally do that, right? But they kind of brush over that. Even at the end of the movie, he's like, I'll find a way to make this work. And it's like, it did work. But he goes back to being the thing. But not before he's like, what have I done? So Doom, tries to pit them against each other and shatter them. And the thing becomes not the thing for a minute. So maybe Debbie should have stuck around a while. But it's okay, actually, because Thing does have another interest. Alicia Masters is in this, which is also an Alicia Masters character is kind of weird, because like it's a real mixed message. It's like she's a blind woman, so it's like, oh, see, I care about the real you on the inside, but also what you're really saying is like, oh, not even like a person with sight could fall in love with you. Think you're that fucking ugly. But yeah, played by Kerry Washington. Wow, what a waste of Kerry Washington. But there you go. So it leads to our big action finale, where the Fantastic Four face off against Doom in a scene that's just not that interesting or good. I guess science saves the day, kind of. They basically all get to... It's really funny, actually, because it starts off with the Thing fighting Doom, and then they all use their powers, but not really. Like, first of all, he tries freezing. Reed. Just not good. I don't know what that's about. It doesn't really matter by the end anyway. So they get into a big fight in the middle of the street, and they all get to use their powers. Johnny, I should mention this as well. One of the other minor plot points, it really reminded me of Ghostbusters.
Don't cross the streams. We'll cross the streams.
They're testing Johnny at one point, and they're like,
Any hotter and you're approaching supernova.
Not only could you kill yourself, but you could set fire to Earth's atmosphere and destroy all human life as we know it.
Got it. Supernova. Bad.
By the way, they just get rid of him using extinguishers. Is that all it takes to defeat the Human Torch? If Doom had a fire extinguisher, he would have won. So they're like, don't go supernova. And then, of course, by the end, they're like,
Johnny, supernova. I thought we agreed that was bad. No!
He goes supernova. Sue covers him with a force field. And Doom starts being really, really hot. His clothes melt away. We see a weird naked Doctor Doom in his metal form, which does not look good. He doesn't look like Dennis Reynolds, the Golden God now. He still kind of looks like the weird metal one. He's moved on from crackhead Dennis Reynolds, but he's not at the Golden God stage. He's just a really weird looking one. I don't know, maybe Charlie when he's covered in silver paint. Oh man, that's an Always Sunny one. Oh, you know what? I think I heard recently they wanted the Always Sunny cast to be Fantastic Four, so go on. I'm all for it. I'm practically already there with this film. And when all that is done, first of all, by the way, Thing has nothing to do with this big action scene, really. There's a moment where you literally see them all doing something, and he's just outside the bubble, like, yeah! But then, of course, Reed uses his science brain. See, science saved the day, Sue, not love. He doesn't have to love you. He has to love science, because it's important. But he's like, do you know what happens when when metal that's hot gets cooled, and then Thing jumps into action, by the way. He breaks the fire hydrant. Oh, well done, Thing. Good thing you were there. And Reed turns himself into a weird kind of like slide to shoot water at Doom, who is frozen in a kind of metal statue. And that's the Fantastic Four saving the day. Way, they won, kind of. What a very uninteresting scene. I mean, I guess it's kind of clever, but it doesn't make for a very good scene all the same. And because of that, they defeat him. Doom is like shipped to Latveria. We get an end credit scene before it's really like before post credit scenes were a thing, but it's barely even post credits. It says the end and then we get it. They're like, oh, it takes 13 days to get to Latveria or whatever. So I don't know. I actually haven't seen Rise of the Silver Surfer. I assume he's in it in some form. I don't know though. I wouldn't care if he is or not, to be honest. The only cool thing I did think with Doom is that he kills one person and that looked really graphic. He like shoots a hole right through him, like Jesus. We also get Stan Lee in the film as Willie Lumpkin. I think it's the only time. It was at one stage, maybe it's changed, but I think it was the only time that Stan Lee played a character he created. I suppose he played a Watcher, so I don't know if that counts, but that's kind of interesting. But not really. He gives them their post at the Baxter Building. That isn't interesting. Why did I say that was interesting? And yeah, that is the Fantastic Four from 2005. Why did it come out so bad? Like, as I said, this is like the epitome of early 2000s superhero film. It's like, didn't have to be very good as long as it looked kind of like the films, and as long as they made the superpowers look good, we were all okay seeing it. And we were okay seeing it, because it did well enough to justify a sequel. As for why this one kind of didn't work out, the year before this came out, we had The Incredibles, often jokingly referred to as the best Fantastic Four film, which, you know, pretty much is. And apparently, they had to make massive changes to the film because they were like, oh, the Incredibles made fun of some of these things, and there were some things where it was similar. Because of that, they had to change the film at a cost of barely $20 million, and there was a lot of script changes, and apparently it majorly messed with the finale, which explains why the ending scene is just so meh. And I guess the film in general is meh, to be honest. That's the word of the day here. Meh. I guess the only other thing I want to mention is the fact that this is the Fantastic Four franchise never really got up and running, but at some point Fox owned the rights to this, Daredevil, and X-Men, obviously, and this was nearly the only time they crossed over, because there's a deleted scene where Reed Richards' face turns into Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. It looks terrifying. Now, maybe the fact it was deleted is why they never, they could have made it look better if it wasn't going to be a deleted scene, but it is kind of weird. And it would have been just a weird bit of trivia, because these, of course, never crossed over. I was going to say that might be for the best, but, just around this time, the X-Men series was going to be at its absolute lowest point anyway, because it was going to have X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine. So maybe they deserved each other. So that is it. The 2005 Fantastic Four film. It's okay. It's a breezy watch. It's the sort of film where if it was on and you just couldn't find the TV remote, you'd be like, all right. It's not bad enough that you'd rush to change the channel. It's not good enough that you'd watch it ever. Otherwise, I kind of was hoping that I might come back to this film and be like, hey, now I can appreciate this and this, and I don't really. I appreciate Chickless is the thing. I think Chris Evans is a pretty good Human Torch. I think the suits look okay. The powers look decent. The effects on the whole have held up, except sometimes Reed does like a stretchy face that looks a little off, but it looks fine. Actually, the thing that looks the most is the thing in space. They do like a weird effect there that just doesn't look fully right. And they also never really explained their powers, by the way. Like, I remember when we were talking about the 94 Fantastic Four, I was saying oh, they were like, oh, well, you stretch yourself too thin. And there is a stretchy pun at the start, but that's seemingly not the reason. I think they were going for an elemental thing, which is actually what I mentioned in the last episode as well, if you want to go back and check that out. But also then you're like, why is Doom metal? Which, we don't get an answer to that question. We don't even get an answer as to why these are their powers. Will we get an answer in the sequel? Probably not. But I've never seen it. And that's why I'm slightly looking forward to it. I think it's meant to be slightly better, which wouldn't be hard if it had a plot, which this one doesn't really have. But the only thing I know about it is obviously the Silver Surfer's in it, and there's a wedding in it because Reed and Sue are engaged at the end of the movie, and he kind of proves that basically, hey, we can have science and love mixed together. He gives her as a gasket from a rocket. That's pretty corny. Yeah, a broken gasket. So that's a little hokey, but I'm sure Reed Richards is a bit of a cheeseball anyway, so that works. And of course our film ends with Johnny, and there's a lot of trailer shots in this. One of them was the shoulder thing. One of the trailer lines that I remember hearing everywhere was like,
Oh, you're hot.
Why, thank you, so are you.
and also him doing the Fantastic Four logo in the sky, which also I don't know if it makes sense, because he never leaves a massive flaming trail behind him in the rest of the movie. Just this moment. And there's another point where there's a missile chasing him. I want to just get this nitpick out of the way. I assume it's a heat-seeking missile, right? He jumps off a balcony because the missile is going to hit where Sue Storm is and he is, and the missile follows him. Why does it follow him if he's normal? He doesn't light on fire, but the missile's already chasing him before he's on fire. And then he lights a barge on fire and the missile goes after the barge. I mean, I guess he can change his temperature or whatever. I hope no one was on that barge. But again, why dwell on it? Because obviously no one dwelled on this film, from the people who made it to the people who watched it. But it did lead to a sequel, which we're going to watch next week. Fantastic Four, The Rise of the Silver Surfer is what we're checking out next week. Check it out if you want to play along at home and watch our reviews of this film series, which so far, pretty mixed. Either way, I've been your cult leader, Tom Pott. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on all the great stuff we got coming up. And remember, I'll be watching. Take care.